Hello everyone, welcome back to this webinar series on Kubernetes. My name is Janakiram. I am a developer, Google developer expert based out of Hyderabad in India. And today I'm very excited to welcome Adnan Abdul Hussain from Bitnami, who is a core contributor to the Helm project. So he works for Bitnami and contributes to the open source initiatives around Kubernetes, the cloud and the container technologies. So in the next 45 minutes or so, we are going to learn about Helm and how it is going to make deploying applications on Kubernetes easier. So I'm going to now turn Adnan a presenter, and he's going to walk us through the entire concept of Helm and Monocular. So Adnan, I am now turning you into a presenter, and looking forward to learning from your session.
Cool, great. Thanks a lot, Janakiram.
Adnan, are you able to present?
Okay. Now I see the prompt here. Okay.
Okay.
Perfect. And can you see my slides?
Yes, let's get started.
Okay. Great. Yeah, so as Janakiram mentioned, I'm here to talk about Helm and Monocular and how Helm and Monocular make discovering and deploying applications to Kubernetes so much easier. So I'll basically start talking about what Helm is, why it came about, and show you a demo of how you might go and use it. And then I'll introduce Monocular and also show you a demo of that, and we'll go ahead and we'll take a look at the running version on kubeapps.com, and then we'll take a look at running it inside a cluster as well and see what that experience is like. So again, my name is Adnan Abdul Hussain, and I work at Bitnami. And Bitnami, we have a lot of projects that we're working on in the Kubernetes space, and a lot of these are kind of centered around making Kubernetes easier to use. And it kind of goes from our long history of making applications easy to use on any platform, whether it be VMs, cloud, or recently containers. So some of the projects that you may have seen us working on include Helm and Monocular as a result of that, but also we've been working on kubeless, which is the serverless framework for Kubernetes, some other tools for deploying applications to Kubernetes like kubeconfig and ksonnet, and a range of other tools like secret management and other stuff in Kubernetes. And I myself, I joined Bitnami about 3 years ago now, so it seems like so long ago now. And I've been working on containers and Kubernetes at Bitnami for I'd say best part of 2 years. And somewhere along the way, I became a core maintainer of Helm and also kicked off the Kubernetes charts project, which we'll have a look at later on, and also became a co-lead of the SIG apps group, which is the special interest group in Kubernetes for apps. So if you're looking for me in the community, you'll probably find me in one of those groups. You can also, my username is Pridonius, so you can also find me on Twitter, GitHub, and I'm on the Kubernetes Slack as well, so feel free to bother me. So I think a lot of people are probably familiar with this. Kubernetes resources are hard to manage. You have these huge YAML files, and they're defining all sorts of things, and it's very manual. You have to edit this file in an editor, and then change specific fields, and then go and roll that out and make changes to it and update that. So it's a very difficult way to deploy applications. And you not only usually have one file, but you have multiple files. So in Kubernetes, you'll have a deployment, which tells Kubernetes what containers you want to run. You'll have a service, which tells Kubernetes how your services will interact with each other. You may have other resources like secrets and config maps to manage configuration that goes into your containers. So there are a bunch of different resources that Kubernetes manages for you, and all of these are defined in single YAML files. So there definitely needed to be a much easier way to manage this, and more importantly, share these manifests. So if I wanted to go to a team member and get him to go and deploy the same thing and have the exact same, reproduce my environment in their environment, I would have to pass them a tarball of all these YAML manifests, and if they wanted to make a change, they'd have to go and manually edit that file and change it. So the need to do things like slightly tweak definitions for different environments, maybe you want to point to a different Docker image for a staging environment than in your production environment, or change some environment variable to point to a different database host, and also manage the lifecycle of your application. If you're deploying via a CI and you need to run a database migration before your application, the new version of your application gets rolled out, then you need to write a script to run a Kubernetes job at a very specific point in time, wait for that job to finish, and then go and continue with the rollout of your application. So all of these things are kind of normal for deploying and managing applications on Kubernetes, or any platform really, but up until Helm came about, there wasn't an easy way to do this. So this is where Helm comes in, and really it can be seen as a package manager for Kubernetes. So you could look at it as something like an apt-get or a yum. The fact that you can do a apt-get install something, you can do it in the same way with Helm, which we'll see. But kind of beyond that, it allows you to define your Kubernetes applications in a package format, and that package format is called charts. And charts consist of metadata, definitions, configuration, and documentation, and it's really easy to share these with either the world or your team through chart repositories. So similar to how apt and the Debian repository works, there's a similar concept in Helm called chart repositories. And these are basically just HTTP servers that have an index file of a listing of all the charts that are in that repository. There's a diagram on this slide here that shows you what a chart might look like, and the core of it goes into this templates folder. So inside here, there's you can see there's a deployment and service YAML file. So this is where you'd put all of your Kubernetes manifests that you might have today. And this is actually a thing I really like about Helm. If you want to just try it out, all you need to do is run Helm create, which is a command that scaffolds out a chart for you, and then copy all of your manifests into the templates folder, and you'll have a working chart. So really, it is just just the Kubernetes YAML, but on top of that, it gives you Go templating. So you can see that there's a helpers.tpl file, and that's just a file that has some helpers that are defined using Go templates that you can then use in your YAML file. So this is great for going back to what I said earlier about tweaking certain parts of the YAML, like say you want to have a specific image rolled out, or change some other configuration, enable ingress, for example, or set a host for that ingress resource. You can do that here by allowing the user of the chart to, at deploy time, specify configuration and have that used inside the chart. There's also so I mentioned configuration for your chart. This is the values.yaml file. So this is a file that lists all the values that can be defined for a chart, and this is just like a key value format, which we'll see in a bit. But it basically, you can kind of see it as the API for a chart. So if I was as a user of a chart, I could look at the values.yaml file, and I could see everything that was configurable in that chart. And then when I go and install that chart, I can set the specific options in that YAML file. And then there's things like metadata. So the chart.yaml file just contains some metadata about the chart, who created it, the description of it, some links and other stuff. And we'll see later, Monocular uses this metadata file to expose certain parts, certain information about the chart. And finally, documentation is, I think, a big part of any application that you want to share with people. The README is a great place to put any information of how you would go and use that chart. And there's also something called a notes.txt, which is a bit of information, again, we'll see this in the demo, that gets printed out after you install a chart. So the nice thing is that you'll notice that the notes.txt is in the templates folder here. And the reason for that is because it gets templated with the same in the same environment as all of the YAML files. So if I were to enable ingress in my notes.txt, I could check for that if ingress is enabled, print out some information on how you would connect to that deployment via the ingress rule. So the way Helm works is you have a Helm command line that sits on your machine, and you have a server-side component, which we call Tiller, that lives inside your Kubernetes cluster. And Helm talks to Tiller via gRPC. So what it does is it opens a port. It does a port forward to your Kubernetes cluster, and then it talks to gRPC over that port. And then Tiller is the thing in between that talks to the Kubernetes API. So when you go and install a chart, Helm will push that chart up to Tiller. Tiller will then read all the chart templates and render them, and then it will actually go and call out to the Kubernetes API and create or update those resources. It also tracks the state of your application, so it uses config maps to basically track the state that your deployment is in, and again, we'll see this later when we run some Helm commands. So it's pretty easy to install Helm. If you're on a Mac and you have Homebrew, you can do a pretty quick brew install Kubernetes-Helm. But if you're not, you can just go to the Kubernetes Helm releases page on GitHub and just grab the binary of your choice. And then to go ahead and install the server-side component, you can run Helm init. And actually, well, this will do two things, and I'll actually see it in action here. So it does two things. It sets up your local registry where Helm will keep track of the different repositories that you have configured, and it will set up Tiller in your cluster. So I already have Helm installed on my machine, so I just get a message saying, both of these things are configured, so I don't need to do anything. If I updated the version of Helm and I wanted to upgrade my server-side Tiller component, I can run Helm init --upgrade to upgrade Tiller as well. So because I've installed Tiller, I should be able to see if I run kubectl. If I check out the names, the kube system namespace here, I'll see that I have my Tiller pod running here. And this means that I can start communicating with Tiller, and I can do something like Helm version here, which just shows me the version of the CLI that I have and the server version as well. I'm actually a version behind. I think 2.6.1 is actually the latest version, but I didn't want to upgrade just before the demo. So Helm has a few commands. One of them is list, and I can see the charts that are installed in my cluster. In this case, I've got the Nginx ingress chart that I've installed. If I want to see what charts are available, I can use the Helm search command. So this prints out a huge list of all the available charts that I have indexed locally. And you can see there are multiple repositories here. So there's so you have the name is prefixed by repository, and then the actual chart name itself. And this is kind of similar to a Docker image, a Docker registry style. So I have an incubator repository. I have the Monocular repository, and I have the stable repository. The stable repository is the one that comes out of the box when you install Helm, so you don't need to do anything to have that. So you already have a range of stable charts just for you to go ahead and install straight away. But you can add additional repositories using the Helm repo add command, and you can see what repositories you have configured by doing Helm repo list. I think I briefly mentioned that these are chart repositories are basically just HTTP servers that serve an index.yaml file. So you can see here for the stable and incubator repositories, which are served from the Kubernetes chart repository, are served over a Google Cloud Storage bucket. But my own repositories, I've got the Monocular one here, and I've got the this to-do app here that I've been working on as well. They're both served using GitHub pages, so it's actually very easy to set up a chart repository. You can do it in your project just by running a GitHub pages site. So I mentioned I have this to-do list application, and I'm just going to go ahead and install this in my cluster. And by the way, I've set up a cluster in GKE for this demo. So what we'll see is the Helm install command has gone and created a release for me, and this is what a release looks like in Helm. Helm will give this release a name, so much like the cool tools like Docker and other things make up these kind of cool names when you don't actually provide a name yourself. I've got Sappy Sil, which is pretty awesome. I have some other metadata about this release, and I have a list of the resources that the release has installed as well. So I can see I have a service and a deployment. And then this is I mentioned the notes.txt that gets printed out. So this is it with it being rendered. I don't think this is doing any particular expansion here. Oh, apart from it is showing me the release name here. So this has expanded the release name, and I'm able to see that. So what this means is that it gives me a command that I can just run, copy and run here, which, if I was just reading a README, I'd have to input the name of the release myself. But here I just get a command that I can just copy and paste. So I have an external IP now for my service, and hopefully my pod is running as well. So yeah, so I can go ahead and visit this and have my to-do app. So I'll just type in something here like Helm Monocular. So a couple other things I can do with Helm. If I run a Helm-H here. So I mentioned create, which is a way to just scaffold out a chart. If you're creating a new chart, it's a really easy way to get up and going. Delete. If I wanted to go and delete the application that I just deployed, I can easily go and do that. There's some other commands here that do various things. The one I wanted to quickly show you is this Helm history command. So if I run Helm history and give it the name of the release, which is Sappy Sil, you can see that Helm has grabbed the state of my release from the config map and is displaying it here for me, and it's telling me that this is the first revision. I've only gone and deployed this chart once. If I did an upgrade, I'd see multiple revisions, and you can see there's a rollback command. So if I wanted to go and roll that back, I could go and roll back very easily as well. And I mentioned the upgrade command as well, which is here. If I wanted to get back that information about the chart where I had the notes and a list of the resources that were installed, I can run a Helm status. So just like when I installed it, I get that same information back. So, and this time actually my service shows up with an external IP. So if you kind of forget what resources are tied to a chart, you can to a release, you can just easily run the Helm status command and get that information again. Usually the notes.txt might have a command for you to get a password or some other credential for the application, and so it's always nice to run that again and get the command to go and get that credential from a secret. Cool, so I'll head back to my slides here. So we saw that Helm makes managing and deploying Kubernetes apps easier. With kind of just a single command, I was able to install my to-do app, and if I asked a coworker or someone else to go and add my to-do app repository and also do the same Helm install to-do/to-do, they would get the exact same result running in their cluster as well. So it's great for managing applications. We can also go and upgrade that application later on down the line. We could add hooks to do specific things before and after an upgrade or install. But it is difficult to discover what's available. When I did the Helm search, it was kind of hard to see what charts were there, what repositories I was using, where things were coming from. There wasn't an easy way to kind of just browse what's available and get information about charts, and that's where Monocular comes in. So this is the public running version of Monocular, kubeapps.com, and you can kind of see it as similar to how tools like npm, RubyGems, and Docker all have web UIs around their registries. Monocular kind of serves that same purpose for Kubernetes. So if we go ahead and take a look at kubeapps.com here. So again, this is a public instance. You can just go over to kubeapps.com and you'll see this. And in kubeapps.com, we index the stable and incubator repositories from the Kubernetes charts repository, and this is the repository I'm talking about here. So this is where the community has curated a bunch of applications that are easy to install on top of Kubernetes using Helm charts. And you can go ahead and contribute to this list very easily by just opening a pull request and submitting your chart, and we'd love to see that. We'd love to see more charts in here. So if you see something that's missing here, please go ahead and contribute it. So in kubeapps, I can do several things. I can see all the different repositories that are enabled here. I can go ahead and search charts. So if I wanted to search for something particular like WordPress, I can go and find that here. Or if I just wanted to search for a blog, I can see all the different options that I have here. If I take a look at WordPress, I have information here about the version and a description of WordPress. To the side here, I have a README that describes how I might go and install the chart, any prerequisites I may need, all the configuration options that I could set on my chart. So you can see that this is there's a lot of configuration that I can set for just the WordPress chart. And I can read information about the persistence and using Ingress and things like that. And then on the left side here, sorry, the right side, I can see a command that I can copy here to go and install this chart. And again, it's just that Helm install command that we've seen. I think this also provides the version that I'm looking at as well. And I can go back in previous chart versions and look at old readmes to see what has changed in particular in configuration or prerequisites or whatever. I can see the application version as well. So if I want a specific version of WordPress, or I want to see what version of WordPress is available, I can see that here. And then I have some other links, just again metadata that I'm pulling out from the chart.yaml of the home for WordPress, the source repository, which actually links back to the Kubernetes charts repo here, where I can see the source of the chart, and if I want to make a change here, I can go and clone this repo and make a change to this. You can also see who the maintainers of the chart are, and any related links, such as the Docker image that is used to build, that is used in the chart. So going back to my slides here. So we've seen the public version of Monocular, but how do you run it inside your cluster? Well, there's a repository for that too, and I already had it checked out locally, so I can run a Helm install Monocular. I'm also going to pass it some configuration that is specific to my cluster. And we'll see exactly what I mean by that in a second. So this time I got Joking Terrier, which I think beats Sappy Seal just a little bit. I'm not sure. So with Monocular, I get a bunch of config maps, a PVC service, deployments, and an Ingress resource. And I have some information here that tells me how I can access Monocular when it's running. So we'll just wait for this to start up here. So we can see that these containers are starting up. While it's doing that, it does take a while, so I will take a look at what the config.yaml file is doing. So I mentioned the values.yaml file and that it's a key value configuration for your chart and acts as kind of like an API. So what I did when I passed the -f flag to Helm install is I'm telling Helm that I want to overwrite the default values that are configured with the chart with ones that I'm specifically setting. And in this case, I'm setting the resources for the chart, so I'm just increasing the resources, the CPU limits and requests that are on by default to the ones that I need for my cluster. I'm also changing the liveness probe a little bit. And I'm also setting the repositories here. So in the configuration, I can add as many repositories that I want here, and Monocular will start up and index those repositories for me. So the only thing I've changed here is I've removed the incubator repository because I just want to see the stable repository in my in-cluster version. And I've also set a cache refresh interval here of 15 seconds. I think by default it's an hour. So typically you wouldn't want to have this refreshing repositories all too often. But for this particular demo, I've set it down to a smaller time. And then I'm also configuring the ingress here, and I'm pointing it to my domain that I've just added a domain here, Monocular local, in my Etsy host to point to my ingress IP address, so I can use the ingress resource to access Monocular. And this brings me to an important point, actually. If I go to this here, so this is the actual documentation for the chart, and you'll notice here that it says in bold, prerequisites, Nginx Ingress controller. So mainly this is to avoid cross-origin resource sharing. What we do is we have the API. So Monocular is split into an API and a front end, and the API is served over a path /API, and the UI is just served at the root. So we use the ingress resource, and I can show you what that ingress resource looks like. So we use this ingress resource here to basically just proxy to the right pods for each route. And in particular, this works with the Nginx Ingress controller because it supports the rewrite target rule, which is important because the API isn't really configured to listen on /API. It listens at the root. But you can bypass the Nginx Ingress controller. So you just need to set up more configuration. So I think if I go down to so here is again, you can find this documentation here in the chart README in the Monocular repository. But basically, it just shows you that if you want to serve this on 2 different domains, you just need to set this configuration to point to the front end host name and the API host name, so that the front end and API know that they can talk to each other. So hopefully by now we have everything running. Great. That all looks good. So if I head over to monocular.local here, I'll see that I have my in-cluster version running. And you'll notice I have 95 charts here ready to deploy. whereas if I go to cubeapps.com, there's 112 charts, and even though I'm using the same repositories, I'm actually skipping out the incubator repository, so I only have the charts that are in the stable repository. So this time, if I were to go to a chart, let's say Redis. So now that it's running inside my cluster, I'm actually able to install it from my cluster. So I get a big blue button here that says Install Redis. So if I go ahead and click this, I can even specify the namespace that I want it in. So I'll type Redis here, and I'll go ahead and click Deploy. And I can even see what's running in my cluster. So if I go to deployments here, I can see all the stuff that I've already deployed up to this point. So you remember I had the Nginx English controller when I started. And then I deployed my SAPI seal to do application here. And then we deployed Monocular, and now I just deployed a Redis instance in the Redis namespace. If I go to see this here, you'll see this looks very familiar. It's a lot of the same input from the Helm status command. So I can see what resources I have and all that information. I can see my notes, and I can even copy commands out from here. On the side, Monocular has gone and extracted some useful information for me. So it's telling me the namespace, it's been deployed, and I can even get a URL to the application. So if I click here, I get back to my application, which has my to-do of demo Monocular. I can even go ahead and delete this deployment here. Again, this is still in development, but some of the things that we want to add, and I'll touch on this again later, are the ability to change, to modify releases once they've been installed. So I may want to scale my deployment up, or I may want to upgrade to a newer version of a chart, and these are all things that are kind of on the roadmap. So now, if I go back to charts here, I have my stable repository, but I didn't deploy the to-do app from the stable repository. It was in my own personal repository. And if I go to repositories here, you can see that Monocular is currently only indexing the stable repository. So if I wanted to add my repository to this, I can click Add Repository here, and I can type in to-do. I can give it the URL, which is, let's see if it will come up. I'm going to have to go and grab it from Helm repo list here. And I'll also point it to the GitHub repository that this is sourced from. And once I click Add, you can see now that I have this repository up here, and eventually we should see it here as well, and it's going to fetch this to-do list chart. And now I can install it through this UI as well. So if I want to deploy this out to production, I can click Deploy here, and I get my my production instance. I'll just keep refreshing here until I have an external IP. While that's getting that, I'll kind of go over some of the next few slides. So we've seen Monocular in action, and we've seen how easy it is to go and browse what applications are available. That was kind of just the main goal with Kubernetes, with Monocular. Like, can we make it really easy for people to see what charts are available in all of their chart repositories, and also go ahead and install them from Monocular itself with one click. And again, you can also do things like grok changes across chart versions, and just get an overview of what's happening in that chart. I touched a little bit on the architecture. I mentioned that there is a back-end and front-end. So the back-end is written in Golang, and this is responsible for indexing the chart repository. So I think by default, every hour it will go and reach out to the stable and incubator repositories and fetch any updates from them. Again, I set it to 15 seconds, so you can configure how often it does that. When it downloads the index.yaml file, it goes through each of the charts in that file and downloads them. If it hasn't already processed them, it will go and download the tarball for the chart, extract things like the README and the icon and other metadata about it, and then it'll store that. And then it exposes this JSON API so that the UI can go and call out to the API and get information about the chart, so the UI can display it. And there's also a part of the backend that talks to Tiller for chart deployment. So when we hit that button and do install, that's another API endpoint to go and do that release part. And then the front end is written in Angular 2. It basically just talks to the API and displays all that information. So before I go over what's next, hopefully we have an external IP here. There we go. So I can go to my newly deployed to-do app. We'll just demo deleting this here. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this. And once it's deleted, I should be able to not see that. And again, just to kind of prove this is real, if I run Helm list, I'll see all of the charts that I've got here. If I run Helm list -- all, I can see the charts that I've deleted as well. So this time I should be able to see the limping rodent that I originally deleted, and you can see the status has been updated to delete it as well. Okay, so what's next for Monocular? Well, we're currently on version 0.4.0. And that was released a couple of weeks ago. And our main focus for the next release, which I expect within the next month or so, and that's going to be focused on adding authentication and authorization to the app. So right now, anyone can go to my Monocular instance and install any application in my cluster. Ideally, I want to put that behind some sort of authentication and further down the line, authorization, so I can specify who can install things and what charts that they can install. And then going further, some cataloging features would be nice. So having a ranking system, being able to rate charts, and also just better categorization. So if I want to find those CMSs or blogs, I can categorize them appropriately. I mentioned this when I was showing off that deployment page, the ability to kind of customize the deployment, scale it out, upgrade it, are also things that are on the roadmap. And just make that releases information easier to use and better to understand. Right now, if I wanted to grab the secret for the WordPress password, I'd have to copy a command and get that in my terminal. But if there's a way that we can expose that in Monocular, that would also be really useful. And finally, third-party integrations. So things like being able to show what vulnerabilities are in a specific image or a specific chart is something that I think would be really nice to see in both the public version and also internally in your cluster. And serverless as well. I mentioned kubeless as one of the projects that we've been working on. There are a lot of kind of useful applications for kubeless where you want to interact with a particular application on your cluster. So an example is, say, Minio, which is an S3 kind of clone. If I had that running in my cluster with kubeless, I could have a kubeless function that listens to events when something is added to a Minio bucket and do something to that bucket when that event gets fired off. And it'd be great to install that as a single chart or both the function, the kubeless function, and the Minio application as well. So that's an integration there would be interesting to see. And obviously, we'd love to hear ideas from the community as well, because you know, we're definitely looking for more contributors and more people using Monocular. So this is the mandatory Helm Community slide. Every time I write this slide, the number of contributors goes up. I think today I had to update this from 170 to 190. So it's always awesome just being part of such a fast-growing community. Helm is actually only almost 2 years old, so it's not actually that old either. We have Kubernetes Slack channels, Helm users, Helm dev, and recently we have a charts channel. And in particular, the charts channel deals with the Kubernetes chart repository. So if you're submitting charts and you want to get help on that, that's the channel to go to. There are public dev meetings as well. So Helm dev calls are at 9:30 Pacific time every Thursday, and charts are every Thursday at 11 a.m. PT. And also we do weekly updates and occasionally demos at the SIG apps meetings, which are at Monday 9 a.m. Actually, just this week on Monday, we had a really great discussion on how people run chart repositories for their applications, and there was a lot of interesting discussion on this. And we also talked a little bit about where we see chart repositories going forward in Helm 3.0. So there's some really great discussions going on there, particularly around Helm and charts. So please do get involved. And once again, as I said, we're looking for more contributors to Monocular, and also it'd be great if you could try it out and give us feedback and suggestions. So yeah, check it out. And those are my contact details if anyone wants to get in touch, in particular with me. And that's all I have. Any questions at this point?
Great. So Adnan, before we go to the Q&A, I just want to pull up a couple of polls. So let me bring this up. So that was a pretty interesting session from Adnan, and this is the first time that I'm actually attending a session on Helm and Monocular. I think this is going to significantly ease the process of deployment and maintaining consistent deployments. So we really appreciate if you can take a minute and respond to this poll. This is about the relevancy of webinar content. Cube.live is all about bringing the experts from the ecosystem to present to you on what's happening in the space of Kubernetes. So this is just the beginning. Till now, most of the sessions have been delivered by me or Joseph Jacks. This is the first time that we had an expert from the Kubernetes ecosystem, and going forward, we are going to invite many other contributors, and hopefully Adnan will come back to us to actually demonstrate kubeless and talk to us about the serverless initiatives as well. So
yeah, that'd be awesome.
Absolutely, we are looking forward to it, Adnan. So let me bring up the next poll before we move to the Q&A. So please do tell us what you felt about this. Excellent. So most of you felt this session is very useful and it's rated very high. One of the highest ratings that we received for Cube.live webinars.
Oh, that's awesome.
Excellent. So Adnan, is there a way by which the audience can get access to the charts that you created and the To-Do and VC app that you have? Where can they get them?
Yeah, so am I still sharing my screen? Can everyone still?
Yes.
Yeah, so the To-Do application, I mean, I can show you the repository for that. It's so I literally just forked the To-Do app from Taste.js, and what I did was I set up GitHub pages to just serve this chart here. So using the GitHub pages URL, if I go back to my Monocular instance here, you know, if you add this repository here, you can go and deploy that chart. You're probably more interested in deploying the Monocular chart. So if you go to Kubernetes Helm /Monocular, this is the repository that Monocular lives in. And if you go to the releases page, we always have a section here for each release on installing and upgrading the chart. So again, it's just, you know, adding the repository for Monocular, and then doing a Helm install. And if you're upgrading a chart, you should probably run Helm repo update. And what I'll do is I'll go out to each chart repository that you have and fetch the new index and populate that list of charts. Does that answer that question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Cool.
All right, so we have a few questions. So the first one is, can we integrate both deployment and service in one file?
Yeah, so it's a good question actually, and I will actually show you an example. So again, I mentioned that the most of what you put in a chart is just the Kubernetes YAML that you're all familiar with. So if I go to an example, I'm not sure if this one does this. No, it doesn't. Sorry, I have to think of an example of this. So this one, for example, which is the CockroachDB stateful set. You can see here that it's got multiple services, and it's just separating them by the separator here. So yes, absolutely, you can have multiple resources in a single file and still use the Go templating.
Awesome, awesome. So there is another very interesting question, and in fact, that's one of my questions as well. So will Monocular run under Minikube?
Yes, it does. And usually I use Minikube for my demos. I didn't this time because usually when I'm screen sharing, it just runs a lot slower. But definitely, yes, you can run Monocular on Minikube. It's really easy to set up. You will need to enable the add-on for Ingress, which I think you can just do if you just run Minikube add-ons enable Ingress. That will get you going, and then you just need to access the IP address of your Minikube instance in your browser, and you'll have your Monocular instance.
Perfect, perfect. So there is another interesting question, and instantly this is the last one that we are taking for this session. So can we host the Helm charts in our own HTTP server?
Yeah, and I'll actually show you. So this again, my to-do app, and I mentioned I use GitHub Pages, but GitHub Pages is basically just an HTTP server. It just gives you an easy way to set up a simple HTTP site, and all you need is an index.yaml file. So when you add a repository, and this index.yaml file basically just it has a list of entries, and each entry is a chart in that repository, and also a version of that chart in the repository. And most of this information is just pulled from the chart.yaml file. If I get this URL again and just show you, so curling this, oops. So I think this is just a.
Yeah, you need the raw content.
Yeah, so this is actually, if I go to this in the browser, this is actually just a 404 from GitHub because I haven't actually referenced, I don't have an index.html file in this, which is why I'm just seeing that. But if I were to curl index.yaml, which is what Helm does, I actually get my index.yaml file just straight from that repository.
Cool.
And then this lists URLs to access a chart. So this is just another URL I can fetch to get the actual chart table. So all you need is an index.yaml file served at the root of your HTTP server, and you have a chart repository.
Brilliant.
I do recommend you take a look at the recording for the last SIG-Apps meeting, because that has demos of using kubeless to run a chart repository using Minio as well. And there's also a demo of CoreS's app registry, which is another way to serve Helm repositories.
Excellent. All right, folks, I want to officially wrap this up, and before that, I'm very excited to announce the next session. So I'm sure most of you in the Kubernetes community heard of Spinnaker, which is the successor of Asgard from the Netflix contribution. So the next webinar in October is going to be focused on integrating Kubernetes with Spinnaker. I actually helped a customer go live with Spinnaker for his CI/CD, running an application on Kubernetes. So I'm going to pack some of those learnings into a session and deliver it to you. So this is going to be a pretty interesting session where I walk you through everything from pushing. So Spinnaker with Kubernetes is what we're going to see in the next session. So stay tuned, and in a day or two, we'll update the registration registration page with the new webinar details, and you can sign up for that. So I want to take the opportunity of thanking Adnan again for walking us through Helm and Monocular. Being a contributor, he's an authority on this topic, and we got the best presenter to walk us through this concept. So Adnan, thanks once again, and we look forward to having you again for the Kubeless session.
Thank you, Janika. It was great to come on and share Helm and Monocular with you. And I also hope that I'll be on in the future to demo some other cool stuff.
Absolutely. So thanks again, folks. Have a good week ahead, and we'll see you in the next webinar.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.